Hi, good morning everyone, and welcome to Stack 2022. It's great to see so many people here in person. The last Stack was virtual, so thank you for coming. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about, embracing really the new world of technology, which is not really a simple journey that, forget about government, that companies go through at this point in time. And I'm glad to welcome many of my colleagues here from some of the latest and greatest technology companies. And so, what is new technology for us? I think the first thing you got to realize is that I kind of relate embracing the new technology world to really a young person leaving home for the first time and realizing that, wow, it's really fun, it's full of freedom, it's full of excitement, it's full of anxiety. But the biggest challenge of all is that it's also full of risk, full of uncertainty. And very importantly is that, how do we deal with these things? Because it's not that simple. One of the first things we realized a long time ago was that we were growing at a significant rate, but we are not scaling fast enough. So like the private sector, the concept of 10x is just as important to the public sector. So what's the difference between growth and scale? The thing about growing is that you keep growing headcount, you keep employing more people, but the output and outcome is actually very limited by the number of people you have. So we realized that the only way to scale significantly and stay relevant is to actually look at accelerators. And there are three kinds of accelerators I want to talk about this morning. The first is a concept of products. When I first started at GovTech about 7-8 years ago, people always ask the question, what's the difference between a project and a product? Well, project is a project. Limited scalability. You do a project, you finish, you wait for a couple of years, and then life goes on. But a product is reusable, it's scalable, and I'll talk a little bit about products next. The second thing that's really important is the concept of platform. You don't want to keep rebuilding something over and over again. You really want to build something that you can adapt and use for as many things as you possibly can. And the third accelerator, which is kind of one of the most important things today, is the concept of the ecosystem. Even the government, as big as it is, cannot thrive of its own. We need to rely on an ecosystem of technology and really reach out. And one of the reasons why we are all here today is that this, to me, is the ecosystem. So, let me just start with products. About 7 years ago, we decided that we need to start building products for the government that are reusable, not just within the government, but for the entire ecosystem that the government deal with. So you get examples like over here, Woga, SingPass, LiveSG, Isomer. These are really a whole bunch of products that allow government, as an entity, to scale very quickly. So today, for example, when we build a system, we don't have to build an authentication system. We use SingPass. And we use it for every single product and system and platform that we build. Reusability, iteration, very, very important. The other thing that's quite important is that we started through products to build a community. And you are the community. Stack itself is a community. StackX that we have every year. And even the meetups that we have almost every month. Those are community that we rely on to help us build these products and use these products for their development on a day-to-day basis. So I encourage you to go to the website there, developers.gov.sg. It's really a developers portal that will show you the range of products that the government has adopted over the last 5 to 6 years, actually. So product, important accelerator. Next one is even more interesting. One thing we realized One thing we realized very quickly is that the function of government is actually very similar, even though we operate in multiple domains. Where you can operate from the finance domain to the security domain to the social domain, but the function of governing is actually not very different. So I'll give you an example. Do we have to build 35 grant systems, or can we build one grant platform? And the answer is that we should build one grant platform. Government give grants, all kinds of grants, training grants, internationalization grants, etc., etc. So we decided about 4 or 5 years ago that we should build a common platform that allows us to onboard different kinds of grants in the government onto that platform. Now, by doing that, what it does is that it allows us to scale very quickly, it lowers the cost, time to market get significantly decreased, but one of the most important things is that it allows us to also build consistency throughout the government, right? So, for example, in the grants process, we have built, starting with simple groups of grants, and we find that we are now extending more and more towards a platform that can easily onboard grants, using, again, rules engine that can be customizable for each agency as they onboard the grant. So that's one example. Other examples could be licenses, for example. Nearly 70 agencies in the government issue licenses. But do we need 70 systems? Answer is no. One single platform for licenses allows us to do that. And we can onboard all the different licenses onto a single platform as we move forward. Goes back to scalability. It allows us to scale very, very quickly. It lowers the cost of implementation, and it also increases the quality, because you're now leveraging on the common platform that's been tested and built over a period of time. The third thing we talk about is that, the cloud. The cloud is really the window to the ecosystem. It's a very, very important thing. Why is it important? Because once you go to the cloud, you are now availing yourself with a multitude of services that the cloud provides. And it's a global community. It's no more just a local community. But going to the cloud is not simple. Why is it not simple? Because there are a couple of things we need to think through. One is that going to cloud, there's risk going to cloud. But the risks are not that it's more risky or less risky than your current systems. The risks are different. Now, knowing the risk well and explicitly accepting those risks is going to be very important for us going forward. The more you know about the risk, the more you're able to defend against it, and the more you're able to build a system that is resilient and is able to scale over time. But this requires a second part, which is it requires capabilities. Even though cloud allows you to abstract significantly, you need to have the capability to be able to understand what it means. The deeper you know the capabilities of the cloud, the deeper you are able to drill in, the better you are in terms of managing the risk and also managing the resiliency of what you're building. So I have a friend who uses the word very often, right, which always says that failure does not respect abstraction, which is true. When something fails in the cloud, if you don't understand how to fix it with the CSP, chances are that you will fail very badly and you'll find it take quite a long time to recover. So over time, what we have done is that we have built a very strong cloud engineering team within GovTech that allows us to build this platform together with partners like AWS and Microsoft and Google to be able to get to where we are today. The third lesson about cloud, which is very important, is that as a government, we have always been building things ourselves, bespoke monolithic platforms. So you tend to want to build everything. You want to customize everything. But the reality is that you've got to try to go as native as you can when you use the cloud. The cloud has thousands of services, and that's what the ecosystem is all about. The more native you go, the chances of success in the implementation goes up. But going fully native also has a risk, which is the risk of locked-in. So balancing the equation between going native and achieving a level of so-called resiliency and portability is really a very difficult equation to manage. And it's something that we have been working on quite a fair bit. And a lot of people talk about things like multi-cloud options. Now, the word is quite a scary word. There's a difference between multiple cloud and multi-cloud. The government adopts multiple cloud. We use various commercial clouds like AWS, Azure, GCP, etc. But to get clouds to work together is really a challenge. And don't believe what the salespeople will tell you that, it's very simple, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud is very simple. It's not. is something that I think it takes time to mature, and I don't think we are there yet. But using multiple cloud allows us to at least achieve a level of resiliency that's needed for us. And I think the last point I have here in this slide is about the fact that cloud is a journey. It's about exploration. And the journey never stops. And you've got to be optimistic that things that you think can never be fixed today will probably have a solution in a couple of years' time. It's something that my cousin who's a doctor tells me, right? That every 5 years you live, chances are you'll live longer because you'll probably find a cure for cancer, find a cure for diabetes, etc. Same for the cloud. Today, the solution may not be there, but a couple of years' time, it'll probably be there. And that's why we've been working very closely with our partners to keep solutioning for newer versions of securities as well as service levels in the cloud. One slide I'd like to show that could be quite controversial is that cloud computing still needs to obey natural laws. And what do I mean by that? Many people have come to us and say, why don't you go out there and build a sovereign cloud? And our answer is that, first of all, clouds still have to adopt the law of physics, which is if you lock everything up and you disconnect from the internet, you get very good security. But unfortunately, it ceases to be a cloud. You lose the ecosystem. Then the second law kicks in, right? The law of scale, which is if you lock everything up, you disconnect from the internet, you get great security, and you try to migrate the services from the ecosystem into your sovereign cloud, well, it's going to cost you a lot of money. So unless you're a very big country with a lot of money to spend, chances are it's not going to be very, very possible. So if you look at this curve here, it's quite interesting because as your security requirements go up, you'll find that the value of the cloud, the benefits of the cloud, actually deprecates significantly over time. So it's something that we learn, and that's why we've been trying to work very closely with our partners to try to have our cake and eat it in a sense, right? To achieve the right level of security, but without necessarily locking everything up and trying to be kind of a strange animal that we create over time. So this is something quite important to us. The next topic I want to talk about is, again, back to the ecosystem, the concept of SaaS. There's a very big misunderstanding that when you use a SaaS, for example, like a ServiceNow or Salesforce or Pega, whatever it is, it's plug and play and life is good. Now, I think that's probably one of the biggest myths you can create for yourself. Because using the SaaS, especially big SaaS like the Salesforce and the ServiceNow, etc., it's not as simple as it is. And we realize that three things are very important for a SaaS to be successful in the organization like the government. One, product capability. And what do I mean by that? The basic instinct of most organizations is to customize the SaaS. And that's a kiss of death. In fact, I was having dinner with Paul Tatum from Salesforce last night. And we're saying that, the moment you go past 10, 15, 20% of customization, your SaaS becomes kind of a Frankenstein. And it's very hard to implement. Worst thing, it's very hard to keep it updated. So the ability to know the product well through your own internal teams, to be able then to advise the business users to configure the SaaS to the best of its ability and to derive the business benefit out of that, and also to re-engineer the processes is really the key to success for implementing any SaaS. And this is something we learned the hard way. We've implemented Workday in the government. We are now implementing Salesforce and ServiceNow in the government. All these experiences taught us that we need very strong product capability within the government to manage the SaaS well. The second thing about it is about engineering integration. Why is it important? Because the SaaS cannot function by itself. So when we were building Salesforce within the government, our integration to Teams, to Outlook, to many of our own internal systems was critical. Because otherwise, the SaaS will function separately, and you'll find that the benefits that it derives is marginal from that. So engineering integration is something that we started building within the government so that we can actually implement SaaS in a very seamless manner. And the third part is even more important, procurement. Can you imagine the government has close to 100 agencies. And if everybody goes out there and try to buy it on their own, life becomes very painful too. So what we have done is that we have actually built very strong procurement processes around it so that we are able to go out there, buy at scale, and actually implement at scale without necessarily going through all this bureaucracy on a daily basis. Now, the next part is actually quite important, the concept of a stack. Over time, what the government has done is that we have built the Singapore government tech stack. And the stack really allows us to really build a coherent engineering platform for the government developers community. It's not just for the government. It's really for all the even vendors working with us to work towards a common DevOps platform, common communications platform, common developers toolkit. And the word I use there is buy to build. Why buy to build? Because we don't build these things ourselves. We use GitLab, for example, and I think Sid will do the closing keynote tonight, this evening. We buy GitLab, for example. We buy Confluence. We buy a whole bunch of other tools out there. And the idea is really to buy these tools, put it together, come up with a consistent process for the whole of government and its ecosystem, but more importantly, also build in the compliance and security standards into the platform so that when people check their code in, they actually do comply and security is taken care of, not as an afterthought, but as part and parcel of the entire CI/CD and DevOps process. So what we have done over the last couple of years is really to build infrastructure layer, which is essentially cloud, commercial cloud that we talk about. We have a base layer, which is what I just mentioned, things like your DevOps platform, your communication, developers toolkit, etc. And then we put on top of it a bunch of common services, either built by the government or through SaaS providers or other software providers that we can use. And put in a design layer that allows us to achieve a consistent user experience across the government. By doing that, we've essentially abstracted application development to a level whereby it's not about dealing with the entire stack, but really focusing on creativity and solving problems. And I think this is another very important part that the government has built over the last 4 to 5 years. As Minister Josephine was talking about, I think trust has become almost like an indispensable part of digitalization. You know, the root of trust is one of the things which many people have taken for granted before, but given the current spat of spam, the whole thing about data privacy and security, this is no compromise. This has become essential to building together a platform that allows all of us to feel safe about and to be accountable and responsible to our citizens and businesses that use government systems. And it's talking about identity, it's talking about inclusion, it's talking about security and safety. All these things come together to form a root of trust, and it has now become such a critical success factor of any form of digitalization that without that, chances are that all your effort will just fall apart. So again, this is something that is an ongoing process, it's a journey. We are glad that we have IAM like SingPass built early on, but we cannot be arrogant about it. In fact, we are spending a lot of time reviewing how we can improve SingPass on and on, because that's going to be critical for us to ensure that the trust level of government system remains high. And the reality is that this battle will continue to be fought on every level as we go forward. And for my last slide, I just want to anchor everything back to something that's really important. Capabilities, tech capability is everything. Because all those things I talk about, without the right capabilities, just doesn't exist, right? So I kind of put together a couple of things, right? That we really need more makers and checkers. In the past, we find that we have a lot of manual checkings for everything, but today more and more so, it's really about the makers that's important. Why is it important? Because at the end, technology is about making something, it's about creation. And getting the right people, the right talent to be able to create well is going to be very important for us. And it relates to the next part, right? Why do I say more experts and less operators? because we should automate. I work with my team quite a fair bit about the fact that when you run a data center today, it's not like before. You don't need 500 people running a data center. You just got to automate everything. Concept SRE is very important. We've got to automate everything as much as we can. So we focus on hiring experts and building expertise to automate stuff rather than getting a whole bunch of people to keep patching and checking on a regular basis, because you're fighting a tide that is very hard to do on a manual basis. If you don't automate and you need manual intervention all the time, chances that you'll be overwhelmed very quickly. And the last panel is quite controversial, because when I wrote that, a lot of people didn't like it. We need no more doers and managers. What do I mean by that? Today, in tech leadership, all tech leaders are not managers, they are doers. We need to be able to go out there and do themselves. Managers need to upgrade their own capability to be able to get the respect of the tech crew that we have out there. So it's not just about managing. Managing is not good enough. The leaders have to truly be leaders and doers rather than just managing the day-to-day operations. And this is something which I encourage all of us, including myself, to keep upgrading ourselves, build the capabilities, and to be able to go out there and keep challenging the horizon as we move forward. So with that, I kind of taken us through a very quick summary. You'll find that many of our speakers today will focus on these topics. And the idea is that emerging technology is not easy. Engaging the larger ecosystem is not easy. But it's something that has become existential, that without that, I think will become irrelevant very quickly. So with that, have a happy conference, and thank you very much.